Your hair looks great.
It's this meeting is being recorded. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm just glad I have a little left. You know, at at 70, it's
Is that
I'm
how old
fairly
you are now?
yeah, yeah.
And you've been doing this for 54 years?
Almost no, 48 years now.
48 years.
This is my 48th year. So I was 22 when I started, and I was still an undergrad because I went to school, left, went back to school, and started coaching as an undergrad at volunteering my time away for 5 years to learn my craft. I was basically what you used to do in the old days. You became a what's it called? Say you're a
Intern?
plumber and elect.
Oh,
No, if you're a plumber
apprentice.
and an apprentice. So I
Mhm,
was essentially an apprentice for 5 years with Dennis Whitby at the University of Oregon. Just a
mhm.
few years with Dennis, but then after that on my own. So you learn your craft day in and day out. I mean, I was going to school, taking classes, working full time, and going over there every day, 6 days a week for 4 hours a day
For free.
for free. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, something that's a little bit lost these days, you
Yeah,
know?
and when you look at my Social Security income statement, it's it's pretty it's pretty bleak until the early 90s. Yeah, I look like I was a street urchin for the better part, the first half of my adult life for sure. I mean, it's what you did. I mean, not many guys were getting jobs, and then there was
Yeah.
not that many jobs to have. Back in those days, the head coaches still coached a lot. There was no operations director, there was no director of recruiting, there was none of that, and you had to be on the track a lot, particularly if you were coaching field events and sprints, which I did. I had sprints, hurdles, and jumps mostly. So, yeah, it's an interesting life.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And in all that time, never got married, never had the significant other.
Man, oh, I had a significant other, yeah, but I just never worked,
Mm.
and it's a for whatever reason, whether it's my fault or their fault or nobody's fault. It just most of the time it was distance, which was really difficult.
Hmm.
Um, and you've probably heard me say in other recordings, it's like other podcasts, it's like I wouldn't encourage anybody to do it this way, but I'm not alone in that. There's a few
Yeah.
guys that did. And unless you got married real young and somebody was able to have the conviction to go through that with you, it's a pretty back then it was a pretty tough choice.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, there's some fortunate guys, Winkler, Seagrave, some of the other guys that were in the sprints group, all had jobs, and my last, I was at Berkeley with Tony Sandoval. It was a great situation, but I was making $6,000 a year,
What year was that?
1984, 85, 86,
Oh,
living in Berkeley.
oh.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun, huh? Yeah.
And I've talked about this side of strength conditioning and coaching on this podcast so many times. That's a side of the life I did not want to live. I didn't want to go into the school side of things or the pro side of things and have to move around. I see how many of you
Yeah.
guys live that life, and it's just not for me.
No, and it's not for a lot of people. I mean, I don't think any one of us thought it was going to be the life we wanted.
Yeah.
Certainly when I look back in my high school friends, I was probably the one that was most expected to have a normal, get married, da 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 life.
Mhm.
And I'm the only one that didn't. And everyone else has been, married, divorced. Some still have managed to maintain their marriages all these years. But um, this is what year is this? Yeah, I'm 52 years out of high school right now. That sounds worse than 70 sometimes, I tell you.
So do you have any regrets about that?
That one, yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at this point in my life and I got a library sitting here behind me and a house and stuff, and it's like, okay, something happens to me, where's it go? the stupid thoughts. It's like, who gets this stuff? What do I do with it? Where does it, who do I leave things to? And at this point, there's probably nobody who really wants it. Maybe my book somebody might want. I've got, well, this place is a mess right now, but let's see. I can show you. Oops, didn't want to do that. Um,
For everyone listening right now, yeah, look at that.
you can see
Look at
I'm in
that
the middle of it.
library.
So that's all this behind my head here. This is all fitness and track and field. This is all politics. This is all psychology, marketing and business over there. It's just the way it is.
Do you have
So,
any hobbies?
no,
Yeah,
that's
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 how I
the
am.
that's the one thing that I would like to start
I
now.
For some reason I would have thought you'd like photography. I listened to how you speak, and for some reason photography spoke to me about you.
I have a couple cameras, and it's something that I've thought about.
Mm.
Music, which I have no proclivity for, but I like music. There's a guitar over there and a piano over there and all kinds of crazy little weird musical instruments sitting behind me. Um, you know, you get too busy and you sort of forget. And when I look at some of the coaches that retired who have had hobbies, it's great to see. I mean, you look at the beautiful artwork of Gary Winkler's saddles now. I mean, it's what an artist. It's amazing, And Red, who was at Fresno State, is a metal art. A lot of guys go into art because most of the time we start our careers as scientists and we finish our careers as artists. And it's just a natural, movement into finding another way to express that artistic side of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
The
go ahead.
more I'm into this, the more I drift towards philosophy.
You do. I mean, you're gonna, I think I've got three shelves over there that are basically philosophy. And Nitsky's on one, and anyway, a lot of people. I can't even remember them all now. Jeez, but it is, and you also get to be, I think, as a male, you certainly get more in touch with your intuitive side as you go through the levels of coaching. You find yourself not quite as based in pure science and research
Mhm.
and that there must be research papers to prove this. I'm like, well, I've never been that guy anyways, because if I'd waited for research papers, I would never have challenged the status quo and tried to create some stuff or taken on new things. I mean, it's in the old days, it's still similar today, but if I go to an URSA, back then there was a club industry, or FIBO, you go to these trade shows, the very first thing I do is walk the outside because that's where all the innovative stuff is. It's not in the middle, in the end, and it's those guys are traditionalists, but on the outside are the people who are thinking outside the box. That's where I met David Weck and where I met all number of different people over the years on the Woodway on the outside. Kaiser was on the outside when I first went to my first trade show and saw Kaiser. It was like one piece sitting in a booth in the middle of nowhere out in a trade show. So, there is certainly regret you can't live in it, you know, and you can try to change it. Well, I mean, I'll say this out loud, but it certainly is not easy to date at this age. Let me tell you.
Yeah,
Uh-uh.
I bet.
No, you're too old for any Americans, you know. American women want nothing to do with a guy this age.
Well,
And
if you come to like a major city, you come to New York, there's a good dating life in the major cities. Where do you live now?
I live in the mountains in Idaho.
There ain't no one
Yeah.
there.
And there's nobody. There's few, if any. And it's a lot of recycling, you know. So married, divorce, married, divorce, married, divorce.
Yeah.
And so it just depends which husband you want to be friends with. Um, it's I know it's a little weird to talk about, but it's kind of funny in a very strange, warped way. It's kind of funny. But yeah,
You know what you got to do? You got to come out here. go on a couple of do a couple of week trips out here and see how many people like moving out to the mountains.
Yeah, you got to recruit, you know,
That's
and
exactly right.
obviously I'm a bad recruiter. Um, I figured, you know, let me see, ski area, cross country skiing, mountain biking. Yeah, I guess it's a lot of dude stuff, you know, and not enough dudette stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, where I live is just amazing. It's Sun Valley, Idaho, you
Hmm.
know, area. I mean, it's stunning. It's
Yeah.
it's 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 not Switzerland, but it's darn close.
What made you pick out there? How did you
Um,
go?
I
How'd you get out there?
I came out here as vice president of marketing for MBT Shoes. They were headquartered here in Sun Valley in Haley, Idaho.
Oh, I knew you were in marketing for Kaiser. I didn't know you were in apparel as
Yeah,
well. Can you talk to me about
yeah.
that? What led you down that path? Were you trying to have a more stable career so you could do the family thing? What had you do that?
Well, in the first time at Kaiser, which was in the late 80s through 95, 96, um, I was part of training and education, which was under marketing, which is where it belongs for the most part. Um, and then the second time was 2010, 2011. There we go. 2011. Yeah. April 2011. And I had previously been and set up MBT Shoes national training and had a lot of track and field athletes involved. You know, Vicky Huber was there, Julie Bright, Sharon Couch, others, and remember a few more. But so they were all going to shoe stores and teaching and training and doing teaching people how to use these shoes and what they meant. So that was for the first part of the market. The second part, of course, was then getting into why, how, doing all the normal stuff in marketing. And from there, I went back to Kaiser a few years later after being in South Korea. And you know, Dennis Kaiser and Randy Kaiser, family to me. I mean, they just always have been, you know, since the 80s. And did I go to pursue a more stable life? You know, I was just pissed at the track and field world. You know, no, I was. I was just tired of it. I mean,
What about it?
I oh, you couldn't get a job.
Uh,
I couldn't buy a job. Couldn't get a job. People have said, I mean, I've had people be very negative to me about me stating that. I'm like, hey, look, I'm just stating facts. I'm not. You can take what you want to out of it, but the fact is that there's a number of men that quit the sport in the 90s that were pretty darn good coaches. Um, you know, for me it was the 80s, but I just happened to be entering that area, although I was older than most of the coaches because I was late in and I went to school once, went to work at Ford's, went to school again, you know, so I worked in the factory for several years and figured out I didn't want to do that. Um, even though the money was great. I mean, I walked away from Ford's in 1975 making 60,000 a year.
that's good money then.
That was good money. And I did it again in 83 making 60,000 a year in Palm Beach and went back to coaching for 6,000 a year. So you can question my intelligence now. It's perfectly appropriate. the, all I can say is, and you can bleep this, the stupid shit you do for coaching. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it drives you. It's just this, and is it a drug? I don't know. I'm not even sure why we continue to pursue it but it's part of the nature of it is helping people. You know,
Yeah.
you've heard me say, you know, my role as a dream weaver, it's to help people achieve their dreams. And you sometimes forget about your own, which is, you know, why I remind the young coaches, don't do that. You know, at least have a hobby. Try to find a significant other. I don't care what your sexual preference, any of that is. Just try to find somebody to be with, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and I I think that in over time that particular passion hasn't left. Other passions may have, but the passion to help people reach their dreams is still there. And it comes up, when you think you're like, okay, I'm tired, I don't want to, and then boom, somebody needs help, and you're there, and you help them. In China, I just had somebody the other day said, we all need your help. Well, if you don't have another part of your life, if you don't have family and children, if you're and you're driven by the strong desire to help, then you are going to go in the direction, whatever direction that is, to help somebody. Now, it's a little strange for most that it's China. I mean, given the current political view. Now, of course, whenever you live in a country, you realize that the political view is substantially different than the reality of living there. But um, I think most people that have been to China, that have coached there, have had a pretty positive experience in general. Most of the time you're leaving with a negative experience, but you know, I mean, the kids work hard. The political system within the culture of track and field specifically is a little weird. Other sports, it's not. Um, the drug issue in China is a non-issue. It just doesn't exist. This whole thing that the USADA is doing is just a smokescreen. I mean, I'm not trying to defend China, but I tell you, I was there 11 years. I never saw nothing. All I saw were kids scared to death to take anything,
Yeah.
anything. I mean, I had to push them to take magnesium, which is, I figured, let's just take that, you know. They would eat outside. They can't eat outside. And when they have, you kind of see what happened with the swimmers. And that was in the hotel they were staying in. You know, people don't realize or don't remember that WADA sent a group of 10 or 11, I can't remember what the number was, people over to China back in the just before Beijing, either just before or just after Beijing. And they went out and just said, go and just go eat and be tourists. Just do what tourists do. And when they came back, they tested them, and 9 tested positive, 1 tested negative. The one that tested negative was a vegan. What I don't understand personally is why we don't have more of the meat stuff in here in the US.
Well, didn't it happen to a kid in the NFL a few years back? Went to Mexico, tested positive for testosterone because he was eating the
Yeah,
meat when they had a game out in Mexico City or something like that.
it did, and it happened to somebody. Well, it's happened here. Arian Knighton and some others just recently. I mean, they've that's why I say the USADA thing is a bit of a smokescreen, because there's 5 or 6 people that are that raced in Paris that have these dealings, and I'm for giving the athlete a bit of the benefit of the doubt. Although I have watched and seen so many athletes do stuff, and see them achieve performances that I know they were not capable of.
Hmm.
Um, and then their coaches get these accolades that they're these incredible, great coaches. And when you look at them technically, you go, how the heck did they do that? Well, they train harder. Really? Okay, we train pretty hard. These are the questions that go through your mind. I'm sure every coach, every elite coach, it happens. I mean, I think our biggest problem in the drug world right now is high school. Those kids know that works. And now with the NIL, oh my God.
Yeah.
If you want to have a motivation for doing drugs, yeah, what a mistake that is. I'm all for helping these college athletes, you know, certainly a bit, but this has gotten out of hand. To me, in my opinion, it's way out of hand.
I don't disagree, but it's so new, so it's like the Wild West. So the pendulum's all the way over here. It'll slowly start to even out. It has to get crazy before people are like, how do we measure this? What do we do?
Yeah.
What's the baseline? So
Well, with the
they got to
amount of
figure out a baseline.
yeah, but with the amount of money, you got to figure that the drugs got to be rampant if the amount of money these kids can get for signing.
You'd
I
I
mean,
I
that's a
I deal
guess.
I deal with a lot of high school college kids,
Yeah.
and I haven't seen all that much. And I will say this, I think there's a lot less drug use now than there was back in the early 2000s.
Oh,
Um,
I totally agree.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
the when I mean when I was in high school, everyone was taking pro hormones, everyone was taking testosterone.
Mm.
Now, dude, I own a gym in the area with some of the best athletes in the area, and some of them are like world class, even in high school. And these guys are just freaks. Like most of these kids don't, and most kids today are they're afraid of everything. Like they don't take many drugs. And some of I there may be a handful of kids, but like you could pick them out real quick,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I just remember back when I was at the Olympic Training Center talking with the drug tester. He was waiting for somebody, and we were just having a chat. And he said, Randy, our biggest problem right now is high school women.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a larger percentage of high school women than men that
What are
were
they
being
taking?
involved. I don't know. That's the funny part is I don't know what people take because I've never been involved in it. People go, what about that? I'm like, I guess I don't know. I've had people approach me, mostly NFL guys who want to, stay on the team, or the locker room chatter is, man, you got to do this to stay, man. That's what you have to do. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, it's like anything else. It just takes more time, and we're not a society that appreciates time
Yeah.
it takes to develop.
Yeah.
The good thing with the youth that you get to work with, and this is not meant to be an offensive comment at all, is that for a long time you could just about do anything and they were getting better. I mean, it's
Yep.
just it is the way it is. But then when you see, I mean, these kids are monsters now. It's amazing to see, and it's not everywhere. I mean, when you've got, I live in a small town where, it's a really difficult for the football coach to get the guys to come to practice to do their summer training. I mean, really difficult. And of course, they go up against schools that do that, and you get trounced.
Hmm.
You have a hard time. Um, so the small towns still are having a difficult time with it. But I mean, if you just follow how much fentanyl and um, methamphetamines are in the small towns in the United States, you could make a guess that there's probably other stuff in the small towns as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, my area was rampant with a lot of testosterone and all that, and then man, I've had probably 5, 6 friends die from overdoses as well,
Oh,
and those same
wow.
kids were the ones taking testosterone as well. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so
Right. It's a
it's
behavioral issue. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and but I mean that also has, I mean, since they cracked down on the pain meds too, like the pain meds are not nearly as bad as they were when I was younger.
Mm.
Like
Hmm.
everything. I don't know. Maybe I'm just out of touch, but everyone seems pretty mild now compared to when I grew up.
So that's great to hear. I mean, I'm living a kind of a brigadoon life. I come back into country every once in a while, and I get slapped upside the face with what I see. Not talking about that, but you just
Hmm.
it's like, wow, what a difference this is now.
Yeah.
Um, and it irritates me without a doubt when I hear people accuse Sue. Like China has these genes. Are you out of your mind? Do you understand how prehistoric Chinese training is? You know, in general, and what we've done to improve it in the last 12 years is nothing short of amazing. I mean, it's completely different than what it was when I first got there.
Hmm.
When I first came into China, every long jumper, every triple jumper, sprinter, doesn't matter. They all did the same workout every day, every week of the year for their whole lives, which is why they're fairly good at the junior level
Hmm.
because they did a little more volume than what we do, and they did a lot more repetition. So by the junior time, they're good, but then there's nothing after that. Then they were fading. Now we've shown them how to go and continue going up. People don't realize that the training system didn't change. Training system doesn't change as you get older. You don't change. So that's why you didn't see those results
Hmm.
before. we got in there and started making those changes.
So talk
Yeah.
to me about the junior level. You always, I've heard you say multiple times, you always try to go back to training youth athletes. You got to go back and
Hmm.
start training youth athletes. You learn a ton training youth athletes. One, are you planning to go back to train youth athletes anytime soon? And two, what are you going to do with them in what age groups? Can you break that down? I'd love to hear about that.
Mm. Well, will I? Maybe. I mean, I've got some friends here in Haley whose kids are in high school sports, and we've got a facility here that, of course, is still a bit old school. It's all mass based, which you're quite aware is a bit of a not a problem for me, but it's just limiting as far as I'm concerned. And again, I find small town life a little bit like China. When I first got to China, it was like, guys, um, you're not going to be able to beat these genetic monsters that are out there, but you might be able to use technology to beat them because I know what they're doing, and they're nowhere near what I'm going to present to you to do. Um, Back then, there was a couple outliers, but for the most part, we were doing stuff pushing the envelope ahead of with technology long before most people were. Today, it's commonplace. Back when I was doing it, it was not commonplace. I mean,
Yeah.
so to answer your question, will I? Maybe. What will I do? Well, I think you probably saw that post I put up the other day on Facebook, and I keep preaching it, and I have for years and years and years and years. Maybe, oh, I don't know. I'm going on probably at least 20 years, if not 30, of talking about, you know, taking a child and not being so specific with them in their sports selection. I mean, your biggest ones are, hockey, soccer, and volleyball. Could make a case for baseball, but a lot of part of the country it snows, so baseball kind of takes a little back seat to other things. But there's just way too much emphasis too early. And I was involved in a lawsuit a number of years ago where, and this way, a young woman had an injury, and it was a fault lawsuit, and she was suing for an X amount of dollars because she was going to be the next Jackie Joyner. And I had to say, there is nothing, absolutely nothing in this world that could ever tell you that you're going to be the next Jackie Joyner, because there's been a lot of women that have come through just like her who were exceptional that never became Jackie Joyner. And there's no system set up to effectively get you to where Jackie was back in the day. So with it, that's the first thing is I wish that physical education would come back into the schools
Mm.
with PE teachers, not just somebody, and not just a way to get kids to move a little bit so that they expel some energy. Finland obviously has a pretty good system set up. China does as well. So does Japan and Korea. Um, in terms of training the athletes, it's fundamentals. They just never get them. They don't have them. Um, I know because when I get those athletes later on, they're still lacking the fundamentals, and you have to reteach them. I mean, I just have a really hard time watching running drills on on YouTube or Instagram or wherever it may be, in which somebody's saying this is the 5 drills for speed. I'm like, dude, well, if they're going to be one of them, at least do it right, and explain it properly. Um, Here's how you do a block start. Well, all right. Um, yeah, I mean, everybody looks at Coleman as the block start guy, and they keep forgetting about Sue and how much faster he was at 30 meters,
Hmm.
much less 60. Um, Now, mind you, and they were only raced together twice, I think, and Coleman beat Sue twice, but there's a reason he beat him in Birmingham, and Sue should have won that race. But the basics, the fundamentals, I still drop back to LTAD models. I'm not going to say LTAD itself, but LTAD models in which, you definitely have to take care of the fundamentals, fundamentals. And I've got a young Chinese athlete that went to Tulane who's now doing club sport in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And she's realizing that she has to do this. She has to go back and teach fundamental movement skills. We're not talking about fundamental sports skills or even specific sports skills, fundamental skills, walking, chewing gum, skipping, hopping, all the little things. And because then when they get to high school, they don't have a large enough vocabulary or in this case, enough physical literacy to create new movement patterns. And that's the whole goal of anything before you're 15, 16 years old is create greater physical literacy.
So give me a rundown of your basic fundamental movement patterns. What do you consider these are the musts that your youth athletes need to be doing?
It's a big question.
Oh, yeah. And I got plenty of time. So whenever you want to sign off, you sign off.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a big question. It's, because there's some basic ones. And one, you get throwing, kicking, walking, running, skipping, hopping, galloping. The throwing skill, in like European sports, they virtually get no throwing skills unless you're in athletics, and a lot of kids are in athletics in Europe. And they're doing the hep and deck as kids, which is a great way to do it. Tumbling exercises. I mean, if you look at what Mark McLaughlin has done up there in Lake Oswego, he's really done a great job with that high school and creating a new environment for training all high school sports,
and making it fun for them too. The kids enjoy it.
Yeah, and making it a good time. I mean, anybody who has a chance and is in the Northwest should stop in and see Mark and see what he's doing, or just at least look online and see what he's doing. But he's incorporating some things that really, if you go back to the 60s, and we look at some of those videos of calisthenics, the things I did, what we did as kids. That's what our gymnastics classes were. We were climbing ropes and on bars and doing all kinds of stuff. And today, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a kid climbing a rope unless they're a wrestler,
Yep.
I mean, or a gymnast, those two particularly. But I mean, you'd get when you see a 250-pound linebacker climbing a rope, you're like, wow, that's impressive.
Yep.
I mean, that's some kind of body strength right there. And you don't see as much as the farm boy strength as you used to see in the past, where they'd get from baling hay and I can remember some high schools where their teams weren't very big. Man, they were quick and strong because they were in the fields, a good part of the year. So the general movement patterns are the locomotion patterns that I think they need to get. And I have been so long since I've worked with kids, I'd have to think a little bit about it, more about it. I know when I get to the elite athletes, I can tell you what they're missing most of the time. Galloping is one they have a hard time with. Skipping is another one.
I can't tell you how many of my guys I've had first rounders in multiple sports not be able to skip.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to break it down. I mean, even a kid like Chris Hogan, who was a wide receiver with the Patriots, won 2 Super Bowls in the NFL 10 years. It took me 2 days to teach him how to A-skip. He had no idea the concept, the hopping, the rhythm, the relaxation.
It's coordination. And if you can, it's coordination through these movement patterns. And we forget with kids that as they're growing, they're stretching that whole fascial part of them. It's growing, and they do, that the fascia has its own neural network. And so, coordination is so involved with all of that and the feedback mechanisms in the brain to give these guys a sense of how do I do that? They might actually be able to motor it, but don't have any idea how to actually coordinate it, meaning to relax, as you just pointed out.
Mhm.
And much of doing this right is relaxation, force relaxation, force relaxation, force relax. Let the force give you back something. Let the relaxation do what it's supposed to do. Reposition, put you back in the new position to apply force.
Yeah. I loved when you talked about that when you get to top speed and it's about allowing the track to give you the energy
Yeah.
back, you know?
Yeah, it's relaxed enough to do it. And if you
Mhm.
keep trying to muscle it, not going to happen.
Yep.
Then this is what Sue couldn't ever quite get. But he was 32 years old and he got tremendously coordinated, but he just couldn't quite get that. And plus he's in this case of his semifinals, running against two monsters next to him and 6'2" and 6'2". I mean, a 5'7" guy. Um, but yet we managed to change Sue's stride length from about 218 to 238.
Mhm.
It's a big deal. That's a big change.
You know, I
Um,
I had never heard anyone break down mathematically before the way you planned on progressing and actually improving. Like, oh, well, we can get your stride length to this, so mathematically it becomes that. I thought that was, I mean, it's so awesome to see a logical approach to training, especially from working backwards. Well, this is where we're going to get, and how are we going to go to that? How are we going to get to that point? And having the list of exercises and the process to get there, very process oriented. You never wanted to be an
yeah,
engineer?
no, no, I didn't. But the good coach, I mean, Winkler was a mathematician,
Hmm.
you know. Um, Obviously Lance has his own way of doing that too. He gets it. Ralph Mann is responsible for all of us figuring that out, you
Hmm.
know. Well, I mean, with Ralph's feedback, and before that, it was Dr. Hay, and between Ralph and Dr. Hay, it was Yu Bing. And we if you embrace science as actually having something to do with the with what's going on, then you're going to start going down some rabbit holes that are really good. I mean, and the math, even when you're just doing training, it's just math. I mean, it's not even hard math, or I wouldn't be able to do it. It's just basic mathematics.
Hmm.
How much do you add each week? Do you add 1% or 2 or 5 or do you? And a lot of this nowadays is you're watching, and you hear people. I hear people basically copy the statements I've made for 35, 40 years, and I know I'm like, okay, they're getting it. Good. um, because if you're doing it, you're shutting down technical sessions as soon as you see a fatigue factor kick in, because otherwise you're training the fatigue factor. You're training
Yeah.
the mechanics of fatigue, not training the mechanics, the technical part. Now, there's something to be said for training the mechanics of fatigue at certain times, but um, it's not the thing you want to do a lot. That's for sure. 400 hurdles needs it more than anything.
Yeah. When I do a lot of rehabs because I'm also a licensed acupuncturist.
Mm.
And watching mechanics, watching things flow, and how you said before, where things become more intuitive, as you get older, and it's more based on just what you see and what you feel versus what the metrics are saying. And I watch a guy running, and I'll just say, cut it. Why? Something about this set, it's speaking to me. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Or it's like, there it is. I see it right there, and no one else sees it. And then I say, hamstring tightened up on you, didn't it? He said, yes. No one else sees it. Well, why didn't you tell me? Why do I have to guess that? You
Yeah.
know?
They don't want to. I mean, and on the side of the Chinese, they won't, because if
And they don't
anytime,
and they don't speak the same language. So
and they don't speak. Well, there we go. Tong tong tong. But they don't. I mean, it's just culturally. they don't
Mhm.
speak of the pain. They just keep it quiet and don't tell the coach. That's
Is that
changing.
stoicism or fear?
Um, oh, probably fear,
Mm.
more fear, more fear that they won't. Remember, those athletes are getting paid, and a lot of times they're coming from poor families, and that money's going straight back to the family.
Hmm.
So, you know, they're not rich people,
Yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination. Um, yeah, you can always see things, feel things. I had a Denver Broncos player, great guy, and I felt so bad for him. But it was a big lineman, about 305. He was running some 40s. I just wanted to run three, and he ran his third one. He went sub five in a 40 electronically. I said, man, cut it off now. You're done. You're good, but you don't need to do anything more than that. You just went someplace your body'd never been before, and it's time. And so I turned my back on him and went to work with someone else. And of course, I turn
Yep.
around and he's running another one.
Like a and got shot, right? Like a horse that
Bing.
got shot.
Yeah, it was, and but that ended his career
Oh,
for a year. You're not going to make the team when you're one of those
ah,
guys. And he was out. I'm like, oh man, I felt horrible. It's like I told him, but he still did it.
yeah.
And um, maybe I didn't tell him firm enough or whatever. I don't recall at this point, but it would have been. But when I turned around and saw him running, I went, oh shit. I knew that we were going to have a problem right away. Because of course, the first thing they do is they try to increase stride length, and as
Yeah.
soon as you do that, you're done.
Yeah.
That's just your hamstrings just going. Yep, I'll just sit here and wait for. Okay, it's time to pop. Yeah.
I had a high school kid years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, who his hammy wasn't feeling great, but he had a camp coming up and he wanted to run a 40. He says, "Your hammy feeling good?" I was, "No, hammy feels fine. Hammy feels fine. Hammy feels fine." I said, "Bro, it's not looking like it." "No, don't even notice it. Don't even notice it. Let's get my 40 time." "Bro, it doesn't look right. I don't know." He runs. Is it was hurting, but I did it anyway. Got a bruise on his leg. Couple
Yeah.
days later, I said, "All right." After that, I had him do the row machine for hours and hours and days and days. Every single day he came
Yeah.
in, he did nothing but the row machine, row machine, row machine. Never lied to me again. Like it's that we, a lot, they're young. It's the ego. They don't. It's like all this age and experience for what, bro? Like what? Why are you
Yeah.
coming here?
Yeah. It's if you don't want to listen. I mean, and at this point in my career, it's like if you don't want to listen, it's okay. Go find someone else. It's okay. I'm all right with that. You know, I can see how great you could be, but it's okay.
It's
Because
okay.
yeah, it's okay you to go over there. Yeah, please, I'll help you. Uh, yeah, it's funny, and I was just in Paris, at the Olympics, and I'm watching the jumps, and I'm watching the Americans, and I'm like, man. And I watched the Swiss kid, and I put a note in this on somebody put a video of the Swiss kid up, and I just said I'd like an hour with him and his coach. Just give me an hour, you know, because the kid should be a gold medalist, and he's not. Um, he's just it's fundamentals. He's doing two things fundamentally wrong, and if he just corrected them, he'd be jumping where the Greek kid is. That's just part of him. It is interesting to see how many of the block starts have changed over the last 3 years.
Mm.
Everybody's finally leaning. Everybody's getting their knee back down on the where it belongs. They're not dropping their front knee as much. Um, there's still a little bit too much, and this is my pet. This is one of my things, and that is a lot of people have never learned to lead with the top of the foot out of the back block. And so you don't lead with the knee, you lead with the top of the foot.
Mm.
And that keeps that whole lever solid. more solid, so that it's ready to come back in, and it keeps it open and doesn't close. You don't get the heel up high.
That's a good cue. I like that.
Yeah, you stand them up and you just put your foot in there and let them pull, and just let them feel it. And then they start to understand how to pull that whole lever to come out of the blocks.
I like that. Now I noticed that when you do your block starts too, you like a neutral spine.
Not always, but there's there's a little neutral, and then I'll start to get just a little that, so I can get some tension around the butt and down the hamstring. But in Sue's case, I didn't need it, but in a taller guy, I will do it. So in a shorter guy, I'll go with a flatter back, and a taller guy, I'll go with a little bit curved, because he needs it. He just doesn't have enough power. He can't generate enough power. So I need a greater elastic response. In Sue's case, if you watch, he'll get it a little bit there. But when I'm setting it up, I'm definitely setting up a flat back when we're doing an initial setup. Over time, I tweak it and then take a look at what's going on. Like if you look at Shi Hao, the kid that ran 652 this year, that is exactly what I changed on him. And I moved his blocks back a little bit, and then had him drop his hips a little and crunch, just let his trunk just bend a little bit, because he's between, he's 5'10" and a half. It's a kid that jumped 843 as an 18-year-old. It's an amazing talent. But he was only a 1075 sprinter, 1078. Now he's running 1015 and 652. So it's a real nice change. But in his case, that's one of the things he needed. He needed to feel that explosiveness in his low back to get that extension.
It's interesting. I had watched Dan Paff coach. He likes a rounded back. I had watched Stu McMillan coach. He's more of the flat neutral spine. And when I coach some of my NFL guys coming out of their stance, I observe first. I see how they respond. I see what they need, what type of athlete they are, what type of starter they are. And there are times where an anterior tilt seems to benefit some of these guys even better than any lordotic or any posterior tilt. You know what I mean? Like, and they spring out of it and they drive out of it so much quicker with a more anterior tilt.
Yeah, to get them to understand that the movement out of the blocks is is this way, and not that way. It's if they can get from here and learn to push the hips forward like that, they're going to be fine. Now, how you get that, that's the second part of the equation. After you set them all up, then you have to actually have to do the movement. So, when the first setup is, the initial setup is an initial setup, and it's a biological event. You're kind of chasing block settings all year round because they're changing. If you're lifting, you don't have the power. If you're, they're changing through the years. So you might be moving it back a little bit, or as you're peaking, maybe they're losing a little bit of max strength and need to move forward a little bit. So but for the most part, they can feel when they get it right after you get the basics down. In Sue's case, the biggest one was, and you see it a lot. It's not just him. Probably 99% of the sprinters, they come out of the blocks and they just go straight down. So, and they don't get it's here and then back.
Yeah.
It's out and then back and down. So I always hold up a Nike shoe and invert it and say, see this? That's the motion. That's what you're going to look like. The inversion of the Nike symbol.
Yeah.
So it's simple. It's a simple cue that's right there in front of you. And then if you're thinking top of the foot, and if you realize they're bringing the top of the foot out and then back down. So it keeps the quad turned on. And it keeps that whole leg in a sense, almost isometric. We talk about DIS, but it keeps that whole leg ready to hit that second step. Or the first step, sorry.
So coming out of the blocks, pure acceleration. My sports, team sports are all acceleration. Like very seldom will my guys hit top speed. I just posted a video of one of my
Pretty
guys hitting
rare.
top speed in pads at an interception, having to slalom. He hit 22 miles an hour. I think I've had him close to 23 at some points. No pads, no obstacles. You know what I mean?
Right.
Tons of rest. Um, what are you doing to train acceleration for people, I guess, other than your elite sprinters? Because I've adopted some of the contrast work where we'll do about 70 pounds of chains, then we'll do 15 kilos on the on like a 1080 or any other machine, and then we'll go free running with the 10
Yeah,
yards, the 20 yards, and 30 yards.
yeah, it's the same. The only thing I put in for team sports is I'll put in, 30 or 40 the hard way. Which is you'll get a 10 meter or 10-yard acceleration, and then you're diagonal for the rest of it. So you're 10 yards out, and then you're for the remaining 30, you're going on a zigzag all the way back out. And so it's acceleration, but off of change of direction.
That's interesting. So you'll do
And
slalom with these guys.
yeah, it's a slalom, but it's a really definitive slalom because it's, you start them out at 5 yards here, 5, 5, 5, 5, and you move them to 10. And when you get to 10, you got to plant, because you're already moving pretty fast. And this is where way back in the day when I worked with Henry Ellard, the reason Henry was just so great at what he did, I mean, he was so good at separating from somebody because he was a triple jumper. A dude could put his foot in the ground going full speed and cut because that's what he did in the triple jump.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's doing 18, 19 times body weight in the triple jump. Oh, geez, in football on the field, he only needs 7, but that's easy. We wasn't even at 100% to change direction. So if you do it, you have to get them to understand that they have to feel that change. They have to feel that eccentric to concentric. And you're right. I mean, it's very rare. What's the today? I can't remember what it is, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, the farthest any running back ever ran was 264 yards in a game, and that was the total yardage. That's not including running the route stuff. So I took that game and looked at all the jogging, back to the huddle, all the fakes, everything. And it was somewhere between 900 and 1,000 yards running that day.
Of
You
what
know,
intensity? Just the jog, but
oh,
from
yeah,
jogging up.
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
it was jogging back, but um, but the pure running with the ball was 264 yards. So even if you were to do a 3-to-1 work rest ratio, you might do max 1,200-yard day with a football player, and that's the best ever, or close to it now. I don't know with what it is, but
I have
I mean, I'm sorry, not 1,200 to be 700, 800. Sorry, yeah,
have you seen some of the stats from some of these special teams guys that are dual position, like a special team / receiver? Some of
I
these
haven't.
guys will do 8,000 yards in a day.
That's a lot of running. 8,000 seems a little outrageous, but I know they're running. They're measuring with GPS. So I mean,
These are practice squad guys that just get abused. Rep
oh well,
after
that's different.
rep after rep.
Yeah, if you're in practice, it's different than game day. I'm talking game day.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
game day. Sorry, but in soccer, I think you get midfield 10,000, 11,000 meters in a game, but the majority of it is really slow. It's less than 4 meters per second.
Yep.
And very, very little gets extremely fast. So, and in football, you're 45 seconds. I mean, as Trace Armstrong put it so eloquently many, many years ago, you're in a fist fight in a phone booth, in the lineman with the lineman. It's true, particularly when you see how well everybody uses their hands, today to fend people off. And I think that if a football team, when you start talking about acceleration, I mean, if you really want it to make a team work, you make sure all your linemen come off the line with incredible acceleration. You know, they typically the first guy to get hit is usually the guy that loses. Usually, the other guy has his momentum and everything. I mean, of course, there's such just studs at football. I mean, it's crazy, but I mean, it's crazy. But the first guy to to deliver a blow is typically the first guy that's going to win that battle in the interior line. Not always, because there's a whole lot of technique in there, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, general rule of thumb.
So what are you doing to enhance that interior lineman? What are you
Today,
doing for a six?
I
Yeah.
know I haven't worked with football in 25 years. Um, but it not like it's changed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they've just gotten bigger and stronger, and I think they're teaching use of the hands earlier. People are getting better at it. Um, and in that case, I'm working on a lot of four step, 5 yard max
Mm-hmm.
acceleration, the ability to move mass in this particular case really fast. And, you know, and this is contrary to the way 1080 does their lectures today. I don't do it the same way. Um, I'm looking at what resistance am I going to be able to move the fastest with the greatest power.
Yeah.
You've heard Rolf and have talked about this before, but we're not looking at getting 20 kilos on there and trying to move it. That's really not what we're after. We are after first step quickness, and even today, the first step is and maybe your last first linear step. I mean, your last linear. It's everything from that point on is going a different direction.
Yeah.
You're playing patty cake with somebody, um, and they're pushing you or you're pushing them, or if you're a wrestler, you can feel where their force is, and you can just let them take their force, and you just guide it. You just guide their force. Um, but um, two step, three step, everything under 10 yards max, and get really, really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Really good and really
So,
fast.
so you don't think doing 20 yards, 30 yards for linemen is useful?
It's conditioning. But in terms of the game, now if you're working with somebody who is going to have to pull a lot, and that is part of the offensive strategy, well then of course you have to do something more. But in general, and it's usually a guard going. Tackles are usually these big old monsters who fight off other big monsters. But yeah, if you know that this guy is going to be asked to be pulling and running in front of that running back all outside, then of course you change.
How about the concept of maximal outputs versus operational outputs? By improving the athlete's top speed, you'll improve their ability to accelerate.
Well, I've had this discussion before, and I have, I, well, max velocity and acceleration are two very different things. But I will say that teaching max velocity will enhance max velocity on the football field, including lateral movement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've had some pretty aggressive conversations with football coaches about that who do not think that's true. And then that's because it's like this. If you take a track athlete who's never played football, they'll be balanced. But if you take a track athlete that's played football, then they're going to take advantage, and they're going to be able to understand how to use their body, and
Mm-hmm.
when it has a force presented to it from an external force. But that's one of the reasons why some of the track athletes were fast. They could get in the clear, but if they got hit, there was no ability to absorb a force. They were just very finely balanced. And that's what you do in track and field. But if you know how to stay balanced, if you know how to play football, you increase their max velocity, you're going to increase everything on the field.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
know,
even going to even further with that, um, the reactive elastic qualities for top
Mm-hmm.
speed. That's what it's, contract, relax, contract, relax. Do you think that's what enhances their ability to change the direction just by constantly doing that turnover?
They get faster at it. They just get better at it. Now, you heard me talk about Henry Ellard. They have to be able to do it with force, though. I mean, we still
Mm,
see too many non-impact knee injuries today. I mean, it's like there's an epidemic of them right now. Um, where guys get hit, that don't get hit, they plant and they lose an ACL. Obviously, really bad in women's soccer and basketball. Um, and why? Why is that occurring more now than ever? I mean, because there's people are doing way more conditioning than they ever did. Probably, I'm thinking,
oh yeah.
but they're doing conditioning it's conditioning. They're not playing the game or other games. So their body's adapted to certain movements and not adapted to other movements that may save them. Um, I still think that the calf strength is not strong enough in most people. Now, obviously, the seated calf has been discussed. Now, I mean, now the subject's been brought up a few years back. Um, but seated calf, the soleus doesn't cross the knee joint. It's not part of that stabilization structure, but the gastroc is, and the hamstrings. I mean, we stopped. I don't know if you guys have, but we stopped doing Nordics
Hmm.
a few years. I just like no, mm-mm.
Yeah.
It's causing too many hamstring problems. You know, could you do it long enough to where it might not? I don't know because I haven't gone there yet. But um, I'm not a Nordic guy, and yet we still do glute ham gastroc races. Similar, but not quite. You know, um, I think I think they have to get that ability, like Henry had, to jam that foot in the ground and go the other way. They've got to be able to feel that. And
Hmm.
if they don't know, if they've got any kind of pronatory problem, that's basically where the knee issues, I think where the knee issues start is in pronation.
Yeah.
Um, if you particularly at speed, if you've got a anthropometric issue, which I haven't seen discussed, but it may be out there. I'd have to go do the research again to see if somebody's done it now. But I think we're seeing longer femurs, shorter tibias. You rotate, you put that in the ground, and that femur's long lever. It's a long rotational lever. It can create a lot of force down it. And if you see women soccer players in general, they usually have much longer femurs than the men do.
Hmm.
Think about it. Go out to a soccer game and watch the girls play, and just look at their bodies and look at femur tibia ratios. It's a number that we measure. You know, we know the jumpers and the sprinters are about 1-to-1, very close to 1-to-1 ratio. Jumpers particularly are definitely a 1-to-1. Sprinters could go a little bit on either side. A shorter tibia, shorter femur is more towards the 400. A longer can be a 100-meter, 200-meter person. But if you get somebody with that long femur, like Jianan, who was the world champion outdoors in the long jump, he has fairly long femurs, and he's had constant hamstring problems and knee problems his whole career. And he's putting so much force. He's very, very strong. He's putting so much force on that knee joint when he's running and doing drills that it just can't hold up.
It's funny that you don't do the Nordics. When I was in college, I'd argue that I was probably one of the strongest college baseball players in the country. I was able to do 10 Nordics, 10 clean Nordics, like I think it's on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very clean. I was able to do 50 glute ham raises in a row,
Mm-hmm.
50 of them straight through. I was able to do glute ham raises with like a 45-pound plate or maybe even 70 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
And my senior year, I had like a little, like my hamstring never pulled, but it just didn't feel right. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, my hammies are strong as shit. What am I talking about? After that, I was like, yeah, this just doesn't add up. Clearly, it's not Nordics. Clearly, it's not glute ham raise. I'm not going to do these anymore when I train my guys, like even
Mhm,
in college. So since college, my only source of hamstring training has been hip extension, not knee flexion.
mhm. I still do the Kaiser hamstring curl because it's
You like it?
fast.
Ah,
I,
yeah, 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 yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
fast and it's bent. So it's not, it's fast and it's bent at the hip. And I just like the speed side of it because I can do it faster. We still do glute ham gastroc raises. We do drops. We do eccentric drops with
Mm.
pulls. So it reflects a little bit of what you're doing. So we'll put, a 20 kilo plate on the chest, come down, drop it and pop up. Uh, but we're feeling that elastic stretch and pop. Um, and that seems to have worked pretty well. I've only had one real hamstring injury. Jianan, of course, his just any given day can be bad, but had one severe hamstring injury, a really really bad one. But he was destined to have it. He had heard it before, and he actually pulled it off the bone. So I mean, at that point,
Oh.
yeah, yeah, it was brutal. I don't know if you've ever seen video of it. It's not fun to watch.
Mm.
I've got the video of the race, and it's like, oh, and the poor kid's out, and he's probably going to run 10:0 9:98. Tall Chinese kid, and he gets to 60 meters, and you can see him just a little bit, and he literally blows up. I mean, blows up at 95 meters and goes up in the air, goes goes over. He's inverted over the finish line and then lands.
Ah,
You know, because he hit the hamstring went and he hyperextended the knee on the other leg
yeah.
and sent him up in the air. I thought he blew out the other leg. It's like, oh, geez, he just hyperextended his knee. You know, yeah, it was brutal to watch. I just sent it to somebody yesterday in the UK. They wanted to see it. It's like, oh man, you're not gonna like watching this one. But um, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I saw your little video today talking about not doing Olympic lifting, or whatever it was. You know,
That's just to troll people.
it is, but it's a relatively accurate statement. I mean, people say, but you do, Rand, because I didn't do Olympic lifting with athletes before, and um, as it's just a lot of it takes a lot of coaching
Yeah.
and a long time. But the
But
Chinese
you don't
were
do it because you don't know how to coach it. That's why you don't
no,
do it.
no, no. Well, if you don't know how to coach it, don't do it. It's
Yeah.
better not to do it. You can get more out of other things in a way. And we just showed this. You might have seen, Rolf. I mean, we do this little, I call it the double dip clean.
Mm-hmm.
That double dip clean, it gives you so much power with little weight. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do 50 kilos and almost equal the elastic index, the EA index that you would get with 140 kilo clean.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's much safer. I'll take that one. It doesn't wreck the back. Shiyu Hao, that the young kid, he's at 150 kilos and he's at 2.2 meters per second at 150 kilo clean.
What are you measuring that with? Muscle Lab?
No, I don't have a muscle lab. I use VMAX Pro or whatever it's called now, E something. Um, and it's been relatively consistent for us. I did gym aware too, just to check it, but
Mm.
pretty close. He's sit right there at 2.2, which is damn good for an 82 kilo kid
Mm-hmm.
to take 150 kilos and move it that fast, you know. But you don't do that overnight. That's not the thing you start with. And how much do you need to keep going? You don't. You just need to keep it fast now.
Mm.
He's 25 years old. Now it's time to just, man, maintain that one. Let's go work on some other stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Make sure that that stays where it's at, and then we build on from that. That's a really good point too.
Yeah, I mean the Kaiser squat, I would substitute the Kaiser squat for cleans any day of the week. It's just what I would do. Um, you can still get a real nice acceleration component out of that from the bottom, although it is a variable resistance. So at the bottom it's less than at the top. But just the same, I mean, how much do you need? You've got to be able to move your mass. You don't have somebody else's mass in track and field, but your mass um, off that block or off the ground or whatever it may be, and you look back on the world record in the long jump. I think Carl hit 3.2 or 3.3 meters per second vertical at the board, and Mike hit 4.2. It's a meter per second faster vertically.
Mhm.
And all that is pretty much attributed to the guys who squat. The rack didn't exist yet that time. So we had our own standard workout, and you probably heard me say it before, but 7 reps in 5 seconds. In Mike's case, it was about 600 pounds. Yeah. Boom, 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 boom.
Have you seen my setup that I do with the belt squat and the bands?
No, I've seen belt squat and bands before, though. I mean, it's what you do when you don't have the other.
Yeah.
And if you can measure how much eccentric you're getting out of it, it would be nice.
That's so we use Move Factor X
Oh yeah. Yeah.
to measure. But the
Yeah.
problem with that is you could only do 1 rep at a time.
I know. We've talked to him since, known Scott since 2010, and he's a Royal Oak guy and I'm a Walled Lake guy in Michigan. And it's just like you got to stop with this one. You got to let people move. And yeah, I don't know if it's losing sales for him, but it's definitely irritating, I guess is the best thing. Now, if you're doing cleans and doing one-offs, it's all right because
Yeah.
you're fine. But when you want to do anything that's cyclic,
Yeah.
and we do a lot of cyclic stuff on the squat and the belt squat and jump squats, you can't measure it.
Yep.
It's over. A single response jumps you can measure, but multiple response you can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my issue with anything, I guess, reactive or repetitive that we're doing with
Yeah.
it. But I mean, if I can get a 1-to-1 ratio where they're going down at 2 meters per second and coming up 2 meters per second, that's our guys are responding real well to that. Or I haven't had anyone match a 2.2 and a 2.2 yet with any decent weight. But even with the accelerated eccentric of the bands helping them, it's the best eccentric we've gotten was a 2 meter per second eccentric on it. And guys can't move a lot of weight with that. They cannot move a lot of weight.
Well, the new device, what's it called? The new rotational inertia system that was out in New Zealand. They've added a motor. So now not only can you get your eccentric, but now you have a motor that will pull you down at a certain velocity.
With a flywheel?
Yeah.
That sounds dangerous.
Well, it could be. Yeah, if you're not smart about where you're setting that motor. Oh yeah, they've got a little electric motor there, and you get what it does is it allows you to use a smaller wheel, and then boom,
Yeah.
pop it. And
Yeah.
so it's again, you're instead of using force or gravitational force, you're beyond that, and you're using velocity to create the force. A greater than gravitational velocity to create the force.